Hey, fifth graders. All right, so for Read Aloud, we're going to start reading this book, which hopefully isn't backwards. It looks backwards on my screen, but hopefully you can see. It is called Soup. It's about two little boys, takes place, I'm not exactly sure when, certainly quite a while ago, back probably when your grandparents were kids, would be my guess. So maybe a little simpler time. But it's about two little boys, two friends. One of them is named Soup. So that's his nickname, of course, not his actual name. All right. So chapter one says a note from Miss Kelly, and there's actually pictures. So if you want to see the pictures, dear Mrs. Peck, your son Robert made a rude remark to Miss Boland, our school nurse. Perhaps it was not intended to be as coarse as it sounded. Miss Boland thinks that you, his mother, should be informed of this. I quite agree, Miss Kelly. So this is a note from the teacher going home to this little boy's mom. I stood stock still in the kitchen while my mother read the note. Underneath my corduroy knickers, the underwear was starting to itch my leg, but I didn't scratch. Instead, I stood there and masterminded various routes of escape. What does the note say, Mama? This was step one. Soup and I had, of course, both read the note over and over all the way home and could have recited it upside down in a barrel of water. But by asking Mama what it said, she would have to believe in my innocence. And as I asked the question, I made sure my eyes were open as wide and pure as I could force them. It was also a good trick not to blink as long as possible, which made your eyes water. Let me see it, said Aunt Carrie. Aunt Carrie read the note, looked at Mama, and made her customary statement. It was what she always said, usually about 10 times in just the forenoon. What he needs is a good sound thrashing. Yes, said Mama, he certainly does. No, I don't, I said. It was all a mistake, honest. It was really Miss Kelly's fault. Miss Kelly's fault? When either Mama or Aunt Carrie started asking instead of telling, I knew that the cause was not lost. There was still a chance to miss the whip, if I could just keep talking. And so I made the explanation as long-winded as possible to let their ire cool. Soup always said it was important to keep talking. Now, when it says miss the whip, this is back during the time when a kid could be spanked, either with like a belt or what I've had friends call picking a switch, which is just getting like a little reedy stick, and they would whack that on naughty children's behinds or across their hands or things like that. It's not like a literal like whip like you would use on animals and that sort of thing. It's not an Indiana Jones whip, is what I'm trying to say. But I must advance with caution, being careful not to demean the noble name of Miss Kelly, who, for what the past 100 years had taught, or who for the past 100 years had taught first, second, third, and fourth grade. I was in third, in the small red brick Vermont schoolhouse. Kids who were my fellow classmates often remarked that their mothers and fathers had learned many a stern lesson from no other than Miss Kelly herself. So there was no way I could push all the blame on such a worthy soul. I must step with stealth. Well, I said, I don't really mean it was all Miss Kelly's fault, but the other day she was teaching us on how to talk. A lesson you don't need, said Aunt Carrie, who believed that little boys and little girls should be seen and not heard, a rule that applied until our ages caught up to hers, which would be never. Miss Kelly said that when you talk to somebody, it's like you're playing ball. First, the somebody asks you a question, and that means they throw the ball to you. But you have to do more than just catch a question like you catch a ball. Here's the important part. You have to throw the ball back. When somebody asks you how you are, you can't just say fine. You say fine, thank you, and how are you? What does all this have to do with everything? I said. Miss Kelly said you have to throw the ball back. So I threw it back, but by mistake, the ball hit Miss Boland. Miss Boland, who was our school nurse, was about 3 times as big as Miss Kelly and about 10 times as big as I was. You couldn't throw a ball anywhere in the whole world and not hit Miss Boland. That's when I got to thinking about it and almost giggled. Could have been a disaster, laughing when on trial. You hit Miss Boland? Said Mama. I'm afraid, Robert, that I don't see all of this. Miss Kelly's note said that you said something to Miss Boland. Did you? Sorta. Exactly, said Aunt Carrie, adjusting her calico apron as if it were a judge's robe. What did you say? It's Miss Boland's job to be the school nurse, I said. She comes around once a week to look at our teeth and see if we wash our hands. And she always looks in our hair to find cooties. Nothing ever made Miss Boland happier than to discover wildlife in the thickets of some kid's hair. Said Mama. There's no lice in your hair. From that you could tell already that she wasn't too keen on Miss Boland. Now was the time to start praising Miss Boland a bit to sound fair. I had built up Miss Boland before I destroyed her, to heighten her fall. My one regret was that Soup wasn't here to enjoy my performance. Come to the point, said Aunt Carrie. She's a good nurse, I said. She was just doing her job, that's all. It wasn't really Miss Boland's fault. She's supposed to ask me the question. She asked that awful question to every kid she sees. What question? Did your bowels move today? And so I said, yes, did yours? I did what Miss Kelly said to do, I said, talking like a machine gun. Miss Boland threw me the question ball, and I caught it and threw it back. That's the important part. So you can't really fault Miss Boland. She was only doing her job, like when she looks at my head for bugs. She's a good nurse. I just can't blame Miss Boland for all of this. Honest, Mama, it's not really her doing. If you're going to blame anybody, you've got to blame Miss Kelly or me. That ought to do it, I thought. Mentioning my name and Miss Kelly's in the same breath would certainly put me in the company of those who are beyond suspicion. To punish me now would be like laying a rod to Miss Kelly herself. No one in our town would dare to think of performing such a profanity. How could a sane mind entertain a yank down of Miss Kelly's breeches? They were probably made of iron. Did you apologize to Miss Boland? Well, not right off, because for a while I didn't see how I'd said anything wrong. Honest. All I did was throw back the ball, and I guess Miss Boland didn't catch it. What made it worse was when the other kids laughed. They laughed? Aunt Carrie spoke in disbelief. Yes, I said. Not all the children laughed. Soup did, and a few of the cut-ups, but that's what made it worse. What do you mean, worse? Miss Boland thought they were laughing at her. Were they? No, they were laughing at me, I guess. What did Miss Kelly say? Miss Kelly asked the class what was so funny. Nobody answered. So then Miss Boland went over and whispered in Miss Kelly's ear. All the while Miss Boland was whispering, Miss Kelly was looking right at me. And she never made you apologize to Miss Boland? I did that before she told me to, honest. But the kids were laughing, and I don't guess Miss Boland heard me say I was sorry. So you can't say this fuss is all Miss Boland's fault. No one said it was, said Aunt Carrie, except you. It's not Miss Boland's fault at all, I said. But I had to tell you the straight of it so you'd understand why she does these things. What things? Said Mama. Looks in your hair for lice. She found a cootie in my hair once. She did not. Yes, she did, honest. It was right after I'd been wrestling with Raleigh McGraw. Stories, said Aunt Carrie. He's telling stories again. What he needs is a good, sound thrashing. He's just going through a stage, said Mama, and it all started when he began to see so much of Soup. It's not Soup's fault either, I said. If you have to blame somebody, I'm the one who made the mistake. Blame me. We shall, Aunt Carrie's voice rapped out like a gravel. But I knew my confession would impress Mama, especially when I heaped the guilt of all the others upon my own little back, insisting that they not share the shame. I was right. My mother believed in me as solidly as I believed in her. Robert, she said, you were rude to that nurse. Were you rude to that nurse on purpose? Or were you trying to do as Miss Kelly taught you all to do? There it was, the hole in the fence, the gaping gate to freedom, an escape from punishment and shame, not to mention pain. Even the way Mama said, that nurse, meant she wanted to believe that her good boy told the truth. All I had to do was say that I was just trying to follow Miss Kelly's sterling character-building directive. But I couldn't. Well, I guess I knew it was wrong, but I can't stand it when Miss Boland asked that question. I don't want to lie to her. So Soup and I figured it all out ahead of time, and I knew the other kids would laugh because they knew I was going to say it. Soup and I drew straws. I lost. Mama, I guess you ought to whip me proper. I got a licking. I was lying upstairs on my bed, my eyes shut tight against the hurt, but I could tell by the sting of the wax that Mama wasn't switching me very hard. Her head was even turned away like she hated the job. She hit the wall a lot. So there we go. That's chapter 1 about this naughty little boy and his naughty little friend and the mean thing that they did. Back then, of course, was a time when people would, the nurse would be in charge of doing lots of maybe things that we would consider gross. Can you guys imagine if every single day, uh, I don't know, someone, me, I guess, or somebody else came in and like, picked through your hair for cooties, for lice, and also had to ask you if you'd had a bowel movement. So if you'd gone to the bathroom that day, uh, probably would be pretty embarrassing, right? So, in his defense, is not great, but that's just the way it was back then. So anyway, I hope you liked chapter 1. I'll post a couple of these chapters on the YouTube channel. So if nothing else, you can listen to them kind of like lunchtime. So this has been about 10 minutes. So that's right about what I normally try to read for lunch. So enjoy your lunch, whatever it is that you guys are having today, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.